September 1776. After the American colonists had issued their Declaration of Independence, the largest British fleet ever dispatched was poised to attack New York. The British were determined not to lose their most valuable colony, and the Royal Navy was tightening its noose around George Washington's revolutionary forces, holding out on the tip of Manhattan. As the American rebels had no warships, the odds were overwhelmingly in favor of the British. But Washington had a secret weapon that could dramatically alter the balance of power. An underwater vessel built by an obscure inventor named David Bushnell. Its sole purpose was to attach a huge bomb to the vulnerable underside of a British warship. It would be the first time a submarine was used in warfare. After more than 2 centuries, no remains or plans of the submarine survive. But a team of craftsmen will attempt to rebuild Bushnell's audacious machine. The adventure begins with an 8-ton spruce log. Henry Russell will carve this tree trunk into the hull.
I've been counting the rings of this log, and the first 50 years comes about to here, so the vast majority of this tree is made up of with this first 50 years, and gradually the speed of growth slows down. So we're looking at a tree that's probably 350, 380 years old, and this last growth is incredibly slow. So actually when Bushnell was working on this submarine, was 50, 100, 150, 225, was actually here. So this tree was probably big enough to build a submarine with when Bushnell was working on it.
David Bushnell invented the submarine with the help of his brother in 1775. Nicknamed the Turtle, they built it in secret in Saybrook, Connecticut. The team's first task is to divide the log into 2 equal-sized halves. Henry's theory is that Bushnell simply split it instead of using a saw.
You can hear it popping apart in there.
Splitting is faster than sawing, but it has a downside.
Yeah, obviously the grain inside's wobbling about quite a bit, but that's split down lower than where we hoped. That's a little bit unfortunate. I mean, just imagine sawing that.
There it goes.
You'd be here
breaking
for days. Yeah.
Beautiful. Perfect.
The team will build the Turtle near Boston at the workshop of Laura and Rick Brown.
Reread it.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
The tiller configuration here.
Yeah, okay.
They teach sculpture at Massachusetts College of Art. The challenge facing the team is to construct the submarine using the tools of the time.
Yes, okay. Now,
A full-size mock-up of the Turtle will help work out the position of the controls.
I don't know if it's going to fit or not, but this will be could be our vertical propeller. It might be a little
we were
big.
just worrying about that, talking
Metalworker Matt Hinksman agreed to pilot the submarine.
like that.
He'll enter through a hatch and use 2 hand-cranked propellers. One moves the submarine up and down through the water, the other forwards.
I would think you'd want it as close to knuckle clearance as you can get, because that gives you that much more room to do everything else.
The Matmobile.
I want a cup holder right there.
See? It's perfect.
Yeah,
Oh, I can actually turn that.
now you operate this with this hand and your rudder with the other.
Of course, I won't be able to see anything.
Matt discovers that steering the Turtle won't be easy, as the driver's seat is well below the portholes and windows in the hatch.
The bell is canted.
He'll have to stand up at frequent intervals.
You got to be up on the floor. Okay. And then it kind of comes.
Looking at this mock-up, it definitely has a Heath Robinson feel about it. When you see these propellers, one going up and one going horizontally, and you think about them just being turned with a little crank, it seems very unlikely, but we'll see. It can't have been easy going in a heavy tide or with a current. It must have been a real nightmare, in fact.
At midnight on a dark, moonless night in September 1776, Bushnell's tiny submarine braved the dangerous currents of New York Harbor. The mission was to attach a mine to the British flagship HMS Eagle. It was David daring to bring down Goliath.
In the summer of 1776, Washington was in a really increasingly difficult position. He lost Long Island, he was forced off Brooklyn Heights onto Manhattan, and his problem really is that Manhattan is surrounded by water. With British command of that water, it was possible he might find himself entirely cut off. Washington needed luck, he needed miscalculation on the part of his enemies, but most of all, he needed some sort of secret weapon that could, if only briefly, do something to take the sting out of that considerable naval threat which was poised in New York Harbor.
David Bushnell asked his brother Ezra to test the submarine. Ezra conducted trials for over a year before the New York attack. During this time, he would have learned all the skills needed to maneuver the Turtle below an enemy ship. The climax of the mission was when he had to drill a bit into the ship's underbelly, leaving the mine attached to the hull on a length of rope. It was an ingenious plan, but could it have ever worked? The United States Naval Academy is helping out the team by running preliminary tests with a scale model of the submarine. The amateur sub-builders may be confident in the Turtle, but Navy engineer Lou Knuckles has doubts.
I think you could make a strong case that it never existed, that it was an elaborate hoax. There are a number of technical discrepancies. What we're seeing, what was said in the literature, in the historical documents, just couldn't have occurred.
Laura's research has left her with no doubts that Bushnell built his submarine.
I do feel that I have an appreciation and understanding of what he may have gone through. I feel in some ways like I'm kind of, and not being assuming, but that I am kind of the Bushnell brain here, because I've read and read and read and read his words so much, and I have tried to listen to his words.
The most reliable evidence about Bushnell's submarine is contained in a letter he wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1787.
The entrance was fixed a quantity of lead for ballast.
Although there is some ambiguity in the letter, Bushnell's description of the Turtle is vivid.
Over the entrance to the vessel was a brass cover resembling a hat with the crown and brim. To make it perfectly secure when shut, it might be screwed down by the operator or by a person without.
Bushnell's letter certainly requires some interpretation. For example, was the brass hatch actually cast in bronze, or would he have used some Yankee ingenuity?
Every household has several copper pots, from small to quite large. It's very conceivable that Bushnell actually could have, just used an existing pot and then made perforations and worked from a found object. At the same time, it was a process that was accessible. It's probably more likely that they just commissioned a coppersmith to fashion the crown for their needs.
Da-da-da-da! It's a real salad bowl, this is. To actually carve this hollow has taken about 2 days for 2 people, which is perfect. I think it's actually quite fast. One of the problems with timber is that it shrinks, and it shrinks at a different rate. As it dries, you start getting a lot of tension building up. And in fact, you can see some of these sort of this is dried out, this piece, and you can see some of these cracks opening up here. If we get any big cracks like this, the water could just come pouring in.
Building a leak-proof wooden submarine will not be easy. The Browns decide to visit New York Harbor's floating military history museum to check out another interpretation of the turtle's hull design.
How you doing? Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Hi.
How you doing?
The turtle exhibit was organized by Jerry Roberts.
So this is your turtle.
A non-submersible turtle.
You know, in Bushnell's letter, he refers to the body as like two turtle shells coming together.
Right.
And where you would enter at the top, where the head would be.
Sure.
And that's the extent of his description of the body.
He said several large pieces of wood. He didn't say 2 large pieces of wood. And the other thing is he comes from a very New England shipbuilding area where ships were made with planks and barrel staving was the common way to join wood.
On the same point.
Right.
It is described as like the bomb. It is made of scooped out large oak pieces. So by referring to the bomb, he's kind of telling you his process.
To me, the most amazing thing about this whole project is the man didn't set out to design and build a submersible. The whole idea of the turtle was just a delivery system for his bomb, which was his main thing. This was not a submarine designer.
David Bushnell was the son of a poor Connecticut farmer who got himself into Yale University at the age of 31. While at Yale, he tried experiments exploding gunpowder in water. Bushnell discovered that gunpowder behaved in a remarkable way underwater. Matt will get a taste of Bushnell's experiments from explosives expert Sidney Alford.
We have about 5 seconds. That would make quite a good party trick, to make a bang even as feeble as that one, and still have the capsule, which is slightly bulged, but that's all.
Nothing happened.
You did see that a lot of gas was generated, and that gas had to go somewhere.
Next, Sidney will ignite the same quantity of gunpowder underwater.
So the tape just holds it there, but the water pressure should be enough, basically, to hold that back, that gunpowder, so it'll poke a hole in the bottom.
It will hold in the gases that are generated as that powder explodes.
Okay.
The tape is merely to prevent the thing drifting away from the hull.
Okay. All right.
Here we go. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a total of about 39 seconds.
Oh, there we go.
There we are.
Get straight into shore. Yep.
No! They don't make boats like they used to.
That's a pretty big hole.
It's a wonderful illustration of the enormous effect of water tamping.
Yeah, right.
It shows that even that much weight of water holds the gas in long enough to cause an enormously enhanced amount of damage.
Bushnell developed a timing mechanism to trigger the blast and went on to invent the world's first underwater mine. He then started work on his submarine, which would plant the mine under a British battleship. Matt has come to Portsmouth with military historian Richard Holmes to assess the turtle's target.
This is HMS Victory, which is actually a good deal bigger than Lord Howe's flagship HMS Eagle.
Right.
But she was about at the time of the American War of Independence, and its job in life was to form a line and hammer away at the opposition's line with extremely heavy cannonballs. By the standards of the age, it would have been a monster, smacking out broadside after broadside after broadside from these heavy guns. It's really a great big gun-carrying platform.
So the Americans, they had nothing at all to really combat this kind of a fleet.
There's nothing that the Americans can do at this stage in proceedings against a warship like this, but have really got no direct answer, which I think makes Bushnell's attempt to find the indirect solution, the asymmetric solution, all the more important. I think it took remarkable insight on Bushnell's part to recognize that the line of battleship, the dominant weapon system of the age, did have an Achilles heel. It's extraordinarily strong, a battleship. It's designed to absorb fantastic punishment, and they're actually quite difficult to sink. However, if you can get an explosive charge underneath them, then that great strength is converted into a great vulnerability.
The challenge for Bushnell was to find a way of attaching the bomb to the ship that would allow the operator to escape before it exploded. He designed a drill bit, or auger, that could be anchored onto the hull.
Yeah, I'm attempting to drive the auger into the bottom of that plank representing the British ship.
HMS Eagle.
HMS Eagle. Am I digging?
Now you're digging in, yeah. Yeah, keep going.
Actually, I'm going to go until I feel like I'm stopped. No, that's pretty good. Oh, that's good right there. And now I can hold my crank, and I can undo this.
Yeah.
Now I can use my...
pull down on it.
A little further, a little further.
Okay, there you go.
The auger will become part of the hatch, which is the most labor-intensive component of the submarine.
It's the most complicated portion of the metalworking, with all the doors and windows that have to be applied through it, and ventilators, etc.
We have some excellent caps for our windows. Yeah, we're on our way to having a complete submarine.
Right now I'm just tapping the edge of the lead over, so it's a little bit of jewelry.
To withstand water pressure, Bushnell made the windows very small. With probably the worst hydrodynamic shape of any vessel ever built, the hull is planed smooth to reduce drag. Separate teams have worked on each half. Now they face the ultimate test of their skills. Will the halves fit together to form a watertight seal?
This is an important moment. We're just going to see how close our flat cuts in the middle are.
We have a turtle.
Well, it's looking very impressive, but I can't work out whether I'm more sceptical now than I was before.
Why are you skeptical?
I think the shape is, you know, why not make if they're going to make a shape, maybe an elongated shape that way. And that's what really surprises me, is that they've done something that's so blobby. They would have been seeing boats all over the place, even if they weren't boat builders. And they must have had some idea about what travels through the water. What travels through water easily.
I think the primary concern was being able to go underwater in a vessel with a human being and to be able to travel a relatively short distance and to deploy the bomb. So he wasn't thinking about a boat and a craft that was going to be able to be really maneuverable so much under the water. The key thing he was concerned about was having a material and a form that could withstand the pressures by going deep. Go for it.
The two halves fit together almost perfectly. But the Naval Academy conducted tests suggesting this great buoyant egg will need a lot of ballast to weigh it down in the water.
Our analysis shows that when we place 1,000 pounds on the turtle hull as described by Bushnell, we're going to see a substantial amount of the hull floating out of the water. What we see, 1,000 pounds is not near enough. In fact, we would need somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,000 pounds of ballast to result in a hull that is slightly bobbing on the surface, as we can see here. In this case, this is the way we would like the turtle to be on the surface, moving towards the HMS Eagle. This is a major problem that I see with the current design that's documented in history.
Today, Lou and his research team will reveal the results of their scale model tests.
Does this turtle look like this one?
I thought so. I can tell that. So
this is the yellow submarine right here. So, I mean, it all boils down to, I guess, the discussion we were having coming up here, and what we've had in the past is the conflict between the dimensions and the ballast requirements. The historical documentation just don't jive. And you know, one theory that we keep throwing out there is, was there really a turtle?
It's the number. I question your thing of it being a myth,
Well, that's...
And the numbers were not given by Bushnell himself. So, no, it's an interesting notion.
Laura believes that Lou is overlooking the possibility that removable lead weights allowed Bushnell to reduce the draft of the turtle in shallow water. Tonight, they're casting the permanent lead keel. In addition to the lead ballast attached to the bottom of the submarine, Bushnell invented a system of temporary water ballast. A foot valve allows water into the submarine. This additional weight causes it to sink.
Daub it up there, bud. Got it?
Two hand-operated pumps expel the water and permit the turtle to rise. Bushnell even devised a depth gauge, so the pilot knew his position in the water. Laura has prepared a traditional caulking from cotton, pine tar, and hemp rope.
Pin in the bottom corner, how's that doing?
What I think will be the most interesting part is the sound underwater. I'm interested in that, and also the lack of visibility, really. I think that'll be interesting, and how I'll have to rely completely on tactile controls now. Because I can imagine you could get turned around quite easily under there.
With its tiny windows, the pilot's view outside was restricted, while inside he would have operated in almost complete darkness. But Bushnell discovered a solution which did not consume oxygen, a phosphorescent fungus which grows on rotting logs called foxfire. He used bits of it to illuminate the compass and the depth gauge. Underwater, Matt will be steering virtually blind, and all the air he has to breathe is the air he brings down with him.
Landing in there, sealing it, so you just give it a good press.
The environment inside the turtle would have been horrendous. Our calculations indicate that within 30 minutes, the atmosphere would become so toxic that it would be extremely uncomfortable and that you would have to surface or go unconscious.
With the turtle's first dive only hours away, Matt could face the possibility of a catastrophic leak. Navy diver Rich Schoenweisner's message is, don't panic.
The problem is if it does start to leak and we have a problem, you're not going to be able to open the hatch or anything else to get them out until the pressure's equalized on both sides. So we may have to fill a lot of it up to be able to do that.
Yeah, that or I've got an axe that'll go through the cap and copper on that hatch.
Yeah. Well, and we should talk about if something does happen and we lose communication.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we lose communication,
if I lose communication with you, it's coming out.
It will definitely leak like a sieve.
After 2 weeks of intense work, the turtle is ready to be christened in nearby Duxbury Harbour. It needs about 10 feet of water for total immersion. There's a race to catch high tide, or there'll be a long, cold wait in the dark until the next tide.
You ready, Gunner? All right, let's get it wet.
All right.
As predicted by Lou Knuckles from the Naval Academy, the turtle will need additional lead ballast to submerge it to just below the hatch.
What do you say? We're on the bottom. We're on the bottom, huh?
That sucks.
So we can't get the hatch below water now inside? Okay, well.
With the turtle sitting on the mud, the dive has to be aborted until the water rises again just before dawn.
Can't control Mother Nature.
Wait a minute first, man.
To give the hatch a good seal, the felt gasket is soaked with Laura's concoction of lard, linseed oil, turpentine, and beeswax.
You're gonna seal me in tight?
Yes.
Okay.
But will it work? Or will Matt take a bath?
I can hear the fat sort of squishing. It's like making little dripping fat. It's disgusting.
That's great.
Taking on water. I can feel the pressure increasing already.
Jim, Chris, can you put your hands on top of the hatch and just push down? You've been in 17 minutes, Matt. I think all we're going to get done this time is to get the hatch underwater, and then you start pumping and come out. Well, guys, take it easy on Matt there, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah. Okay, Matt, you're fully underwater. What are the windows doing?
Yeah, I can't see anything out this window. I can see light, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Matt, why don't you try the propeller, see if it does anything?
Whoa, I'm moving.
Son of a gun. Thing actually works. All right, man. Hey. All right. Rich, you happy?
Yep.
Okay, Rich is happy.
Tell me when I get to the bottom of the doors. Taking on water. Oh, I can see the water through the window. Through the front window. Cool. All right.
Any leaks around the brim, Matt?
Actually, nothing's leaking. Oh, wait. Well, I do have a little leak. It's not big. It's just a drip, 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 Chinese water torture sort of thing.
As the 30-minute limit of the dive approaches, a combination of oxygen depletion and rising carbon dioxide levels increase the chance of Matt losing consciousness.
Yeah, Matt, are the pumps working okay? Why don't you start pumping and get it so we can get the hatch out of the water, and then we can Matt? Matt, you there? Okay. Guys, cable up. I can't hear Matt. Let's go. Cable up. Cable up. Matt, are you there? Okay. Cable up. Cable up. Let's go. Come on. Cable up. Break the hatch.
You all right? Hey, how are you doing? How are you doing in there?
As it turns out, Matt's fine. It's the communications that died.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
You just proved that a bunch of non-boat builders can build a submarine, which is what's happened 250 years ago.
I'd like to go back in again and test it. I'm really interested to see how well you can control the neutral buoyancy and really see if you can pick up some speed in that, get a wake going behind it, you know. No water skiing behind it, I'm sure, but like, I think it's going to be amazing to see it in their tank down in Annapolis and see how it really works off tether.
The Turtles trials continue 3 months later at the test tank of the US Naval Academy in Annapolis.
It's going to stay right here.
First up is the drag test. It'll indicate if the turtle could reach 3 miles an hour, as claimed in an account by the operator.
What drove you guys to the width? Why did you end up with the 5-foot width? I mean, you're just trying to interpret what was written.
Yeah, it's not conclusive.
See, I'm working it from a hydrodynamic point of view. From a hydrodynamic point of view, if you cut the beam 1 foot, you change the drag coefficient, you cut it in half.
There's no way that Ezra could have gone 3 miles an hour It's more like maybe half a mile an hour at best.
So what is that saying, Lou?
The rudder is going to be meaningless. I think the rudder is not going to allow you to turn the turtle at all. It's, what's happening is the water apparently is going up underneath the turtle, and then it's flowing up behind it in an upward direction. When you're trying to turn it, you have no control whatsoever. I think it really is. You're at the mercy of the current.
I don't think it could have done the mission that it was set out to do. Superman wasn't inside of it, and there would have had to have Superman inside of it to have done the mission. So, I mean, I think it was a brilliant hoax. Problem is the amount of power it would take to go any distance for any length of time. And he can't deliver that kind of power. Lance Armstrong couldn't deliver that kind of power.
Oh, look at this. Welcome home.
Well, it's the old makers and maybe the new makers. You know, we work in a more empirical, hands-on, old materials world, and they are in this virtual computer world. And I don't know that you'll ever find out what's accurate. So I do think that it worked for Bushnell, and if this doesn't work at all, then maybe there's something that we need to readjust in our design. We'll see.
Well, I'm hoping to see how well the object moves and to actually feel the rudder and feel the forward propeller and see how well I can move about in the water, which I didn't get a chance to do before. I'm thinking about how I can definitely get the treadle in here before we do this the next time.
Matt's top speed is a turtle-like half mile an hour.
I must be going real fast now, huh?
Basically, what we've proved here is that it probably wasn't very fast. And that the 3 miles an hour could be referring to the tides as well.
I'm going to spin myself all the way around the other way.
Matt quickly discovers that the only way to get the rudder to turn the turtle is by sculling.
Doing a good job.
Kind of looks like a fish tail.
Actually, moving it or rotating the turtle's quite easy.
It is, yeah. The sculling really works well.
Matt wants to take the turtle underwater to see how easily he can control its buoyancy. But Lou is ready, as ever, with more bad news.
Pumps. Now, this is just a little demonstration about what I think we'll be seeing tomorrow and how sensitive it's going to be to take on water and be able to pump it back out again. As you can see, the turtle, our simulated turtle here, is just bobbing on the surface. Assuming we've put in the right amount of lead for fixed bows, we're going to have to bring on an additional about 300 pounds of water for this to submerge. What I'm going to do now is just inject water as it would be coming into the inlet valve. Now, I think what's going to happen as soon as we start getting water going into the turtle, as you can see, it should start submerging. And there it goes. And of course, at that point, you can see how rapidly it starts going beneath the surface. Now, as soon as it went beneath the surface, I started pulling water back out again. And I think that's what you're going to want to do tomorrow. As soon as you start seeing the turtle going down, meaning that we are slightly negatively buoyant now, you're going to want to start pumping.
Because it's going to drop like a stone.
Because it's going to drop like a stone, and you can see if we continue just pumping it in, there's a certain amount of mass there, so it's going to take a while for it to start reacting. But once it starts, it goes.
Wow.
The amazing thing, though, is that this system that Bushnell designed in 1775 is what's being used in nuclear submarines today. It's so he was way ahead of his time.
Shortly before Bushnell's brother was due to attack HMS Eagle in the Turtle, he became seriously ill and was replaced by an inexperienced pilot named Ezra Lee. In a strange twist of fate, Matt Hinksman suffers a similar disappointment. Just as he is ready to relive the experience of piloting the Turtle, the Navy insists that only qualified divers will be allowed underwater in the submarine. So, Matt is bumped off the mission to be replaced by the Turtle's most outspoken skeptic, Lou Knuckles. And he has to fight hard to hide his disappointment.
The way this is going to have Lou Knuckles going to be the operator, Reasons to abort the test, as we talked yesterday, if we have a loss of comms, if anything is damaged, either a person or a piece of equipment.
I was very much aware of the risks, I think, in Duxbury. I really was, but willing to do it. And I think that not a lot of people would allow themselves to do that. I mean, we were on our own. You know, we weren't under an institution like we are here that's requiring certain safety parameters. But I also think I wouldn't have done it if I felt unsafe. And I'm not a reckless person.
Right pump is obviously working. Water's up over my ankles.
Lou will now find out how easy it is to achieve neutral buoyancy in practice. His first lesson is to remember to close the air intake valve.
Okay, no leak. Up, yep, there we go. we got a nice little shower there.
He looks like he's holding it 22.5.
Looks like you're neutral at this point.
Okay.
Neutral buoyancy is basically when the turtle is floating submerged beneath the surface of the water, it's neither going up nor down. It's just hanging out there. If he achieves neutral buoyancy, he should be able to, with relative ease, using the vertical propeller, move himself up and down in the water.
Okay, try the vertical prop.
Okay, he's holding. Oh, he's coming back up again. Yeah.
How about if I go down?
Yep. Yep, so you're going back down. You're at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
I'm on the bottom. Eagle, we have landed.
What we're going to do is try to recreate what Ezra Lee did at the HMS Eagle. We're going to try to move beneath and try to plant our auger into the bottom of the HMS Eagle.
If you can imagine Ezra Lee in this little 7-foot wooden sphere underwater, intentionally paddling himself amidst a 400-ship fleet of the world's greatest and grandest navy, and directly above him is probably a 150-foot warship with 500 or 600 men on it, highly trained, highly equipped, and here he is, one person in the dark, you know, making this literally a little stab for freedom here to try to repulse the great navy.
Underneath the giant hull of HMS Victory, Matt and explosives expert Sidney Alford try to work out how difficult it would have been to sink a big warship.
My knowledge used to be applied to the outside.
Sidney first needs to know the thickness of the timbers beneath the waterline.
Here, in fact, if we go in here where it's set back, it's only 17 inches.
17, yeah. All right. There's a spot down here where I think we can measure the thickness of the hull right near the keel here.
The average thickness of the hull is 2 feet of solid oak.
My hand all the way down. I
Get
can't
it
even
stuck.
I can't even.
Initially, Sidney recommends placing the mine on the flat underside of the ship.
There's some,
Wow.
Well, there's some stuff.
Until they realize that this may be the worst place.
There's this ballast behind you. There's all this pig iron. These kind of billets would be everywhere along the bottom of the ship. I mean, these are pretty heavy. Oh my God, that probably weighs 80 pounds anyway. And how would have that actually impacted
The
our
whole bottom of the ship?
Yeah.
I would say it will make an enormous difference to the size of bang that you're going to need to perforate the hull. That's equivalent to about 18 inches of armour. The sheer mass of it will be trying to hold the timbers down as the explosive is trying to splinter them inwards. It will make a terrific difference. The target is a much tougher target than I would have expected. The placing, I would say, will probably be crucial. And what it means is, I think that it will be impracticable for them, ineffective of them, to try to place a charge under the flat part of the hull, which otherwise is the place of choice. It's most stable, and you've got the greatest head of water. I think they would have been forced to place the charge on the rising part of the hull. How on earth could they have stuck a mine on the outside, on the sloping, a rising part of the hull?
Yeah. There's not that much metal to wood ratio. You know, there's very little metal actually on the hull, but in fact, Ezra Lee says that he must have hit something in the backside of the ship, whether it's one of these hinge straps up above or the copper sheathing that would have been covering the whole keel.
I would have thought that if he'd hit that, he would have said, oh, damn, moved over slightly and tried again.
Right. So if he actually had gotten the auger stuck into the vessel, and we would hope then that this positively buoyant mine would float up and sit against the side of the hull, the ship's hull.
Lou will now attempt to attach the mine.
Okay, so I'm coming at you, Eagle. It's difficult to see where I'm going. I have to stand up so I can stop. I can't imagine how Ezra Lee could have found his way up underneath the ship. All right, coming up. Coming up. All right.
Ah, yes, I got him. No, I don't think I have it.
Okay, I'm just sculling it around to try to get it aligned again. Coming up, using vertical prop. Nothing yet. Coming up.
Yep, I think I've got it. But I'm not sure I'm going to keep it.
Looks like you're in. Can you disconnect?
I'm going counterclockwise.
On the internal?
On the auger, yes. I've turned it. It should have been disengaged.
He's stuck in there.
Looks
stuck.
Looks like he's stuck. Divers, someone knock on the side of the tank. Get their attention.
He needs to release. He needs to back.
Is he stuck?
He needs to.
It hasn't been disengaged. Okay, drop down.
So I'm going to flood.
No, go ahead and use the prop.
No prop, okay.
Yeah, you've been flooding enough.
His auger's stuck and his CO2 level's building up. He's got about 3 minutes left before we have to have him switch over to breathing air from the scuba bottle.
Yeah, he can unscrew it.
The divers are trying to disengage you.
Surprised at you.
Yeah.
You saw it?
Yeah,
Very
it worked fine. We tried a bunch of times.
Okay, you've been disengaged.
I backed it out at least.
But you have to drop down.
You have to dive down. If you have backed it off, you're still engaged. And so the only way we'll release is if you go down. And you only have to drop about an inch or an inch and a half.
Even worse than the case that we had thought about a great deal was the fact that now the auger is stuck in the bottom of the ship, and even if I flood, we can't open the hatch. So I think in Ezra Lee's case, he would have been a goner at that point.
The events on the night of September the 6th, 1776, turned into a different kind of nightmare for Ezra Lee. The Turtle was cast off from the rowing boat prematurely, and it was swept past HMS Eagle on a strong outgoing tide. Ezra had to paddle back against the current for 2 exhausting hours before he finally submerged below the Eagle. He described in a letter how his drill was deflected when it struck metal, and with dawn approaching, he decided to abandon the mission. He returned with the tide to the battery. To distract the attention of a British patrol, he released the time bomb, which, as intended, exploded 30 minutes later.
I think the chances of him actually succeeding were extremely low. The currents had to be exactly right and push him against the Eagle for him to be able to slide down the side. So he had to do this extremely quickly. It was a stab in the dark, literally, for him to try to attach that auger. And everything had to be just, the luck had to be with him.
Lou makes one final attempt to attach the mine.
Okay, this is going much, much better. Okay, you've got it. Jam it.
Stick it.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, you're in.
All right, let me come up. All right.
Okay.
It looks like I got it. All right, I'm backing the auger out. coming in.
Okay, you're free.
All right.
I would like to think that the turtle existed. No one's ever seen it. It's really the limitation is your senses of where you are. The turtle works perfectly.
Are you surprised?
not after I saw what you guys did in January.
Okay, all right.
You guys are incredible.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
The success of Lou's mission changed his mind about the turtle. Henry, too, has become a believer.
My skepticism has been wiped. No longer, I totally believe. I believe in the machine.
That's right. Henry.
No, that's like a workout for sure. When I saw that propeller go round and go forward, that's absolutely. You just suddenly realise the whole thing's possible. Every single thing that you thought wasn't possible has proved to be pretty well possible. Incredible.
It is.
When Ezra was towed from the tip of Manhattan, his mission was fraught with danger. With 150 pounds of gunpowder sitting behind his head, he had to evade British sentries and brave the fierce currents that swirl around Governor's Island.
That's Governor's Island.
And that's out where the fleet was.
If I had been Ezra Lee on that night, and knowing that out there were about 500 British ships waiting, I would go out there. Or I could wait for the British ships to come in and take my life. So I think that would be the decision.
History has shown that young men and women all over the world, in times like this time in 1775, have the courage to mount a vessel like that and to take on that task, even though it seems very frightening and a daunting task, that they have the courage and they go for it.
After the failed attack on HMS Eagle, the Turtle made 2 more attempts at sinking British warships. Both were unsuccessful. By now, Bushnell was seriously ill and lacked the funds to train a new operator. Disheartened, he abandoned his submarine for good.
I think that if he could have stuck with it, he would have really worked out a lot of these problems. I think his task was beyond instant success. You know, he had so many things against him, but he was very, very, very close.
After the war, Bushnell disappeared to France, only to return to his native soil late in life. He settled in Georgia, assuming the name David Bush. His underwater adventures would remain a secret until after his death.
Bushnell is certainly one of the 2 or 3 gurus of the submarine, and I think quite underrated in history.
The Turtle was so ahead of its time that it would take another century before the next submarine was used in war.
What David Bushnell was doing was something that no one had ever done. It was going into a completely different realm. It's like us going out into space nowadays. I mean, really, he was doing something that people hadn't even conceived of doing.